Good morning, everyone. This is Amanda Fox with All Chicago, and I'm here with you this morning to provide some information about the preliminary point in time count, or the pre-PIT, as well as doing a general shelter point training. So, as I just mentioned, I am recording this webinar, so this will be available after we've concluded the live presentation, if you need to review this later or have any other of your staff view this presentation. Feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. Please do use the question function to submit your questions. If I can, if you do put anything through the chat, I'll try to pay attention to that one as well. But I'm going to focus primarily on any questions that come in through that menu option you have on the right side of your screen. So we're going to look at the agenda here and see what we're going to talk about. And here's the agenda that I want to cover today. And this is a follow-up to the in-person training that we did a couple days ago. So this is very much the same information that we provided in the in-person training, and we will also provide more in-person trainings if anyone feels that would be more helpful than getting just the webinar version. But we are going to talk about that overview of the pre-PIT and the expectations, and all of the things that we're doing right now are leading up to the date of the pre-PIT, which will be Thursday, September 22nd. So whoever's in beds on that night is who we're going to count for the pre-PIT purposes. And we're also going to do some shelter point training today. And I'm going to show you all how to work with adding households to beds, and we need to clarify how it's going to work for singles as opposed to families. And I want to make sure you also know how to empty beds, whether that be one bed at a time or multiple beds at one time. And then we'll have some time for questions and answers, of course, and as well, if you have questions throughout, please do submit those too, and I'll respond to them. And we're going to jump right in here to that overview of the pre-PIT. And everyone hopefully is realizing now that we are less than a month away from the date of the pre-PIT. It is going to be September 22nd. And here's a list of those programs that you should be thinking about, the types of programs that you operate that should be participating in the pre-PIT. So this is meant to be a simulation of the HMIS portion of what we'll do for the official PIT. And as you all probably are realizing, the official PIT, or you already acknowledged, the official PIT happens in January. So this is an exercise to prepare us for what we're going to do in January. And we'll talk about that in the next slide of why we're doing the pre-PIT now. But just notice here where you fit. If you're an emergency shelter, interim housing, transitional housing, whether that be permanent housing with short-term supports or interim housing as well, and safe havens. So the objective, what we're trying to accomplish, is that everyone that participates in the official PIT would also participate on the 22nd of September to put their clients that are actively enrolled in the program and occupying a bed on that night into a bed in ShelterPoint no later than midnight. So we are not necessarily putting any time specifics on when this data entry has to happen on that day, and I'll talk a little bit about some of what the programs can do that are not emergency shelters. We'll talk about that, how it works when you keep your clients in your program for long periods of time. But we want to make sure as well that the assessments, if there's assessment data attached to those clients' records, we also want that to be updated. In particular, the UDEs is what we're going to be looking at, along with who's in beds. The way that it works with the PIT in January is we have to be able to pull out data from the system that not only relates to how many people are in beds, but also what the demographics are of the people in those beds. So whether they're in specific household types, whether they're singles or families, as well as the racial background and ethnic background or ethnicity, gender, things of that nature will also be pulled from the system to see what we're going to be able to use come January. So let's look at the information about why we are doing the pre-PIT in September. And the biggest reason we're doing this is to prepare for the official PIT in January. And we did do this in 2016. We did go through these steps, similar steps, I'll say, to collect PIT data in HMIS. But typically, the way that it works is the data that we use for the official submission for the PIT count which goes to the federal government, to HUD. Typically, it's taken from the tally forms, the hard copy tally forms that DFSS facilitates the distribution of and the collection of afterwards, after the PIT occurs. So, and again, we're only talking about the sheltered PIT count right now, but there is an expectation from HUD that communities start working towards using their HMIS as the data collection tool for the point-in-time count in January. So there's a lot of standards that HUD sets around how the PIT has to occur, and one of those is that you should already or be working towards using your HMIS for that official data collection and submission. And we are planning to do that for 2017 as a community in Chicago. We want to use HMIS to put the data into a system, and that system will be HMIS. And then we want to take that data out of HMIS to actually submit it to the federal government to represent how many sheltered homeless people we have on the particular night that we do the PIT in January. So again, we're going to simulate that on September 22nd. And the community that sort of governs this process is a representation of a lot of the programs that participate in the PIT. So there is a subcommittee. It's called the PIT Subcommittee, and they've actually been meeting for several months now already to plan out the 2017 PIT. And it was basically their decision to request that the HMIS team do this pre-PIT in September this time. And remember that we did it in, we did one of these in January as well, for those of you that remember. And that is mostly for the purpose of making sure that not only the system is going to be able to provide the data that we need to submit to HUD, but also that all of our users, all of our programs are able to do this and willing to do this come January. So we're trying to work through any issues that might arise. And there's generally just more and more emphasis being put on HMIS. And so what's also happening is we are preparing as a community for coordinated entry. And with coordinated entry, we will be heavily reliant on bed assignments in HMIS to know how many people you're currently serving in your beds, as well as how many open beds you have. So you're going to start seeing more and more emphasis from our team to have programs utilize ShelterPoint, or what we call shelter stays, which is what ShelterPoint creates when you put clients into beds. So that's just, this is somewhat the beginning of that, but some of you are probably already aware of that because our interim housing providers, a lot of you are actively using ShelterPoint already to track who's in your program. And I have good news for you. But I'll share that with you in just a couple slides. And I'm going to go into the results quickly here from the 2016 PIT count that we did through HMIS, so you get a sense of what we're being measured against. So we used what we did in January to kind of inform what we hope to see in September and then in the January 2017. So let's look at those results. So in general, there are 104 programs that participate in the official PIT every January. So of those 104 programs, 92 are using HMIS actively. So of those programs, 77 actually participated in the HMIS portion of the PIT in January 2016. So when you do that math, we have 84% of our HMIS participating agencies that actually did the HMIS portion of the PIT, in addition to the tally forms from DFSS. So taking a little bit more of a look at that, those results, we did do that comparison. We have the counts per program on the tally forms that DFSS compiled. And we compared that to what was in HMIS for each of those programs with the number of clients in those beds. And approximately 50% of those programs that participated did have a 100% match between what was on the tally forms and what was in HMIS. So that was wonderful. But we also had, just on average, a 92%, approximately 92% of a match for all programs, just on average, including that 50% that were an exact match. So that's just some feedback on what we were able to accomplish already. And now I'm going to show you sort of what our goal is for 2017 count in January. And we are setting our goals high. We want to have 100% participation from all programs that use HMIS. And I think I might have neglected to mention that it's possible that this would be the last year that we would need to use the paper tally forms in addition to collecting data in HMIS. So this has been, as I said on one of the last slides, this is the third year, this will be the third year this January that we will actually do the consent, or I'm sorry, the HMIS portion of the PIT in addition to the tally forms. And but what we're hoping to do is prove to us as a community that we can rely on HMIS as the source of this data. And the only way we're going to prove that to ourselves is if we can do one more year of the dual process and have those results match much more closely than what we had happen this year. So we want that percent of participation to increase to 100%. So we know that if we got moved away from the tally forms, we would still have 100% participation in the PIT. And we want to make sure that we can get our results from the paper tally forms to match what's in the HMIS beds as closely as possible. And the aim, as always, is going to be at 100%. But this is potentially the last year that we would have to use the tally forms in addition to the HMIS data. And again, our goal is going to be to use the HMIS data for the official submission to HUD. But the only way we're going to be confident that that's going to work is if we have a successful pre-PIT. So that's really a lot of what the pre-PIT is helping inform is sort of what we can expect in January. So let me know if any questions arise. I don't see any questions yet, just in case anyone has thought they put one in. There are none at the moment, but let me know if you have some. So we're going to move now back into the logistics for the September 22nd pre-PIT, and this is where I have good news for a lot of you that don't have clients that are in beds in an emergency shelter. So what we are going to do is ask programs that are serving clients as an emergency shelter to have all their beds emptied before they start doing the pre-PIT count. And we say emergency shelters, and what that specifically means, the programs that have clients that are new clients coming in every night, and you cannot anticipate who will be there from night to night. A lot of you don't have that scenario. A lot of you are in a situation where you know exactly who's going to be in your bed, most likely on September 22nd, assuming nothing happens between now and then that discharges them from the program. So that's that second piece where interim housing, transitional housing, safe havens, those are traditionally the programs that would know who's going to be in their beds on that night. And we want to allow you to keep your clients in beds. So the goal is just going to be to get everyone that's in beds into a bed and ShelterPoint, get that done by midnight on September 22nd, and you can start preparing now. So that means if your clients are not, if you currently don't use ShelterPoint, but you're familiar enough with it, you can go into the system and start updating ShelterPoint's beds to put all the clients into beds that you anticipate will be here on September 22nd. And that most likely is just whoever's in the beds now. And then all your work would be, come the actual date of the pre-PIT, would be to confirm that that list is accurate. And if there's been any adjustments on anyone exiting, you would remove them from beds if they exited before that date or on that date. And then you would just add anyone to beds that's actually new to the program and hasn't yet been put into a bed that should be counted for a pre-PIT on the 22nd. So again, we want to do all this before midnight. So if there is a question about whether you should be emptying your beds or whether you think you can leave your clients in beds and start that process now, let me know if there's questions coming up for your particular program. But I want to mention that since a lot of the interim housing providers are currently using ShelterPoint, there was a lot of feedback after the PIT in this past January that it was challenging for those programs to be able to empty their beds, refill the beds, and then kind of move forward from there. And we acknowledge that perhaps we are ready as a community to trust the data in the system in ShelterPoint and allow you all to be the ones that know your clients best to be able to tell us who's there on that night and who's not, meaning they will be removed from beds if needed. So I'll leave it at that for now, and you can let me know if you have questions. But truly, this implies that if your clients are already in beds right now that represent who's sleeping in your program on a nightly basis, you don't have to touch anything. There's not a lot of preparation. And come September 22nd, you would just need to confirm that that is accurate, and that would be truly all you'd have to do at that point. Okay, so the next part of this is really going into ShelterPoint and looking at the system. So we've basically gone through everything about what the pre-pit is, why we're doing it, and who needs to kind of do what based on the different program types that you operate. And now I want to move into that training piece where we confirm that everyone is comfortable with ShelterPoint. You get to ask any questions you have, and I actually do see a question, so I'm going to look at that real quick here. The UDE. So UDEs, and I'll go back here to show you that slide. And UDEs. So the objective at the very bottom there, the last word is UDEs. That's Universal Data Elements. And so that's the questions that relate to the client's name, their date of birth, their veteran status, their gender, their race, their ethnicity, those very basic questions around demographics, things of that nature. So again, we're going to be pulling from HMIS not only who's in your beds on the 22nd, but also some of the data about the household types that they're connected to, if they're singles or if they're part of a family, as well as chronic homeless status will also be something that we're going to see how it's going to look when we pull the data out to be able to say who's chronically homeless that's in beds on the night of the 22nd. So let me know if there's any other questions about that, but that is the answer to that question, UDEs. And I'll move forward again here. I think that was the only question that I saw. So I'm going to jump into these using ShelterPoint slides, and then we're going to go into the training site for HMIS directly, and I'll show you some of the live demonstration of this. So ShelterPoint, it's got its own menu option on the left side of your menu in HMIS. And part of what we're doing here is making sure that everything is set up properly for everyone. So if there seems to be any issues with the unit list when we get to that step, definitely check your system. Check it now if possible, and let us know if you're seeing anything that doesn't look correct. But once you go into ShelterPoint, you do have to choose a provider and a unit list. And this slide is just giving you a little bit more detail about those providers and unit lists. It looks like someone actually has their hand raised, and it's going to be a little bit easier. There's quite a few people on the webinar. I can try to take you off mute, but I think it's going to be a little bit easier, Anita, if you do end up putting in a question. So if you could type in your question, that would be great. And if you do think that it's easier for you to just explain your question, and it looks like it's been up for a while, so maybe I can just put that down, and you can let me know if you really had a question or not. Okay, so this is just a little bit more explanation on choosing the unit list, the provider and that unit list. And basically what you want to make sure you do here is have the unit list set to one of the program that actually has the beds, and then choose, if there are multiple unit lists, you can choose the correct one, and sometimes it will populate for you if the system only sees one unit list available. But I'm going to move into the next screen here so you can see the view all, or the window that shows you the ShelterPoint dashboard. And what I wanted to emphasize here is just sort of we're looking at the different windows that you see in ShelterPoint to make sure that you're familiar with them, you understand what they're offering as far as options, and sorry, just looking at questions here, and that you are able to navigate this properly. So what you have in this dashboard are a client check-in option, that express check-in option. Those are ones that I would say that you want to focus on knowing how to use for sure. But also, we'd like to point out that that view all option in the bottom right, that is one that will get you to basically every other option available here. And that update confirmation list as well as transmit today's checkout list, those are both options that you would use if you want to do an exit of multiple clients at one time from beds. So all of these have a different function, but you can basically get to every single one of these options through the View All window. And I like to suggest that people start with that one because it shows you all of your beds. It will show you what's going on in the program in terms of who's already attached to beds and how many beds are empty. So I definitely like to point that one out. And I just realized that I didn't mention to you all that there are handouts as well that are attached to the webinar, and it should be on the right side of your screen in the menu that you can download those handouts. And those are the slide deck that I'm using right now, as well as a specific handout on putting families into beds. So let me know if you have questions about any of those handouts as well. And I don't, by the way, I don't see any questions, but let me know if I am missing any questions. I do not see any right now. Okay, so moving into the next slide here, I wanted to show you the difference between, just some explanation before I show you how it works in the system, between putting families into beds and singles into beds. So I've realized that there is this possibility of us creating child-only bed assignments in ShelterPoint, and therefore I need to teach you how to put the families into beds as they are connected to the head of the household, basically. So a similar process that we use when we create entries and avoid those child-only entries, the similar process applies to putting clients into beds to make sure that you don't create child-only bed assignments. So I will show you how that works, but still each individual client will be put into their own bed. And then separately, singles. It's much more flexible. You can put in random bed assignments for singles, or you can put them into specifically the bed that they're sleeping in. If you have the numbering system matched between HMIS and the physical bed setup at your site. And the random bed assignment option would be to use express check-in. So I wanted to actually use a poll here and see if there's, see how this will work for all of you. If you notice, if you know already whether you are going to be serving singles or families. And I'm going to launch this poll right now. And I would like you all to, answer that poll. And it looks like you are, so thank you. And I'm seeing that half of you or so are serving singles compared to some of you that are serving both singles and families. I'll give you a second here to finish this. Okay, thank you for that. And it looks like about 43% of you are serving singles only, and 36% are both singles and families, compared to 21% that are families only. So that is good to know, and I think you should be able to see that right now, actually, what the poll responses are. So great, that worked out for us. And that just helps me know what I need to show you. And it looks like, again, the majority of you are going to be putting in singles, and then there are some of you that are doing both, and a lesser amount of you that are doing just families. So that's good to know. And let's kind of move forward here so I can keep showing you some of these screens that you want to be familiar with in the system. And again, thank you all for participating in that. So unit list. When you do go in through that View All screen in ShelterPoint, you are seeing what's called a unit list. And hopefully this language is familiar to a lot of you because of the data quality assessment process. And basically, there's the unit list right now. It informs the data quality assessment process so that we know how many beds there are possible in the program. But what we're asking you to do is actually populate those beds in ShelterPoint. So it's just to draw that connection, and let me know if anyone has questions about that relationship between the unit list and the data quality assessment process, but I'll wait for you to let me know what questions you have before I explain anything more about that. But basically, what this screen is showing you right now is how many beds are open, how many beds are occupied. And notice on the very left side of the screen you have those red circles with the minus signs, and then beneath them you have the green circles with the plus signs. Those are navigation buttons to help you take someone out of a bed or put someone into a bed. And that will be on the next screen, that we'll look at some more of what that looks like. But just realize that as soon as you go into that View All screen in ShelterPoint, this is what you'll see. All of the information in the floor, room, and bed columns is completely customized to your program. And you can see here we have it set up as a just very straightforward, simple numbering system, bed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But in some of your programs, we've done a much more sort of specific build out of the names of these beds, even if we wanted them to match the units, if you're transitional housing or permanent housing with short-term supports in your scattered site. These are also, in some cases, they're built to represent the exact unit numbers that you have. So there's a variety of different things that you might see as far as the setup, depending on the program that you're looking at. And we've been working with the ATAs to get all those set up properly. And we can make adjustments between now and the 22nd of September if there's anything that needs to be fixed. But I will also mention there is always going to be an overflow bed at the bottom of the unit list. And I'll be able to show you that in the training site, just to point out to you what an overflow bed looks like. And just so you know, overflow beds are okay as well. You can use those if you don't have a specific bed available. The system is always going to give you an overflow bed, just assuming that you could sometimes have a need for an extra bed compared to what's available here. So again, let me know if you have questions about this. But there's also navigation buttons at the bottom of this screen anytime you're in the unit list itself. And right now you can see that update confirmation list and that transmit today's checkout list. Those are the 2 steps you follow when you want to check multiple clients out of beds. And I have some slides on that as well as I'll demonstrate that in the training site. But just notice that some of your lists are very long. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom of those unit lists, you'll start to see the navigation buttons. So okay, we're going to move into the next slide here. And this is just another visual for you of those unit lists, just drawing your attention to the button you would click on to remove an individual client from a bed. So that very top one is what I would click on to remove Bowman Test, in that case, from his bed. And then at the very bottom, that green plus sign would be what I would use to add someone to that empty bed right now. And when you click on these green plus signs, that's what I'm going to show you next, because I don't have a slide for what it looks like when you click on this red minus sign, but basically you're just choosing the date that the client left the program and confirming. But when you click on this green plus sign, I want to show you what you'll see. And it takes you to a client search screen. So whether this is something you've seen yet already or not, I can definitely imagine that this could be confusing at first, of why it's taking you to the same search screen that you use when you go into Client Point. But you will notice at the top of your screen when you see this that you're still in ShelterPoint, but you're basically just looking for the client that you want to attach to that bed. So you either can search for that client by their name, or you can use the ID number field. And if you do search by name, you'll have to click on the green plus sign next to the client's name when you see it in the results. But if you notice at the bottom of the screen here, I'm just showing you what it looks like when you get when you do that search and you see the duplicate names. One thing that I encourage people to do in January when we did the HMIS portion of the PIT was to have a list of all the client ID numbers that you know would need to be put into beds for the purposes of a PIT or a pre-PIT. So if you're going to search for clients, and it might be something to consider to have a list of their ID numbers handy before you start this process. And again, well, actually what I'll say is that in the slides that you can download from this webinar directly, there are, at the end of the presentation, there's several slides that go through how to set up accounts report to get that list of client IDs, or how to create that list using Report Writer. So you have those available to you if you download the slide deck from this presentation, but I'm not going to go through all of those slides, and I won't give that demonstration of how to compile that list unless someone asks me to do so. But I'm not planning to walk through how to create that list unless someone asks me to do that specifically. Okay, so this is what it looks like when you are clicking on that green plus sign. And what I want to show you now is what it looks like when you go into what's called Express Check-in. So this was a different menu option that we saw from the ShelterPoint dashboard, but it's also available when you scroll to the bottom of the ShelterPoint View All window for that unit list. You can start Express Check-in from that screen as well. But this is one that you would only use for individual clients because you can't put families in beds from Express Check-in. And it's random bed assignment. So you also cannot choose the bed that you're assigning the client to, but it is the fastest way to put multiple clients into beds at one time. So here's some more information about Express Check-in, and that's at the very bottom there is what it looks like when you start Express Check-in from the unit list itself. And I think that's all I'm going to, as much time as I'm going to spend on this slide. But here's the top of the screen that you see when you initiate Express Check-in. In the next slide, you'll see what the next couple of slides, you'll see the rest of what the Express Check-in screen looks like. But basically, you're setting it up in Express Check-in to allow you to put one client after another, after another, after another into beds. And so that date in at the top of the screen is going to be the date that's used for every single client that gets put into a bed. The date on here right now is very old, but we would want it to be whatever date you want those clients to be assigned to a bed as of, and the deadline for doing this is going to be no later than checking them into beds on September 22nd, 2016. So that would be the last possible date that you could use, but there you can put clients into beds today, you can do it tomorrow. If you did it 2 weeks ago and that's still going to be current and reflect who's in beds on September 22nd, that's okay too. You can leave them in beds as long as they stay in beds past the 22nd, meaning that on that date they'll have a bed assignment and then I can grab that data later. It will work out okay. And again, when you are ready to search for clients, you have those multiple options. You can do the name, the ID number. There are some providers that are starting to use scanners and scan cards for clients, and that would be an option as well. But it's going to take you again to through Express Check-in to the client search screen. That's kind of the middle of the screen. But then the next slide I'm going to show you shows you what's at the bottom of the screen, which is where you actually see who's been attached to a bed. So you would search for the clients by name here, or you would plug in ID numbers. If you search by name, you would have to click the green plus sign. If you put in an ID number, you would click Submit. And once you do that, you'll see this at the bottom of your screen, you'll see this Express Check-in list, which will basically have each client show up in that by name in that list. And if there's a possibility that your setup in ShelterPoint will have some clients, some alert windows that are set up to pop open. And this is an example of one where you would just click on Continue to say, yes, I do want to check this client into a bed. But that's just some of the features of Express Check-in to be able to, and generally ShelterPoint, to be able to alert you when it's someone's first time staying at your in your program. This slide is just showing you that full window there of what that list looks like in Express Check-in. Once that client's been attached to a bed, they will show up on the bottom of the screen with a bed number, so you have that confirmation that they are in fact assigned a bed. And once you see that the client has a bed number, that is your confirmation that you've successfully put them into a bed. But if you happen to click on that Submit List button, you'll get that alert that's on the left side of your screen that tells you this client's already in a bed and nothing was updated. So that I'm a little perplexed on what the Submit List window does for you, but basically it just pulls up this alert because the step that's happening here is the client is being attached to a bed, so be aware of that, and basically not to be confused. Okay, so I don't think I'm missing any questions, but if by chance you think that I am, feel free to let me know. And I just don't see that anyone else has put questions in, so I'm going to go with that and keep moving forward. So the other thing I wanted to mention or touch on here before we go into the training site is the process to empty multiple beds at one time. So I'm basically giving you an overview of ShelterPoint here because this is information that's meant to relate to a lot of different possible scenarios, and some of you might find that the last data that was put into ShelterPoint was from January 2016, and maybe what you're going to need to do is empty all of those beds and just start now putting your clients that you are currently serving into beds. And if you want to go that route, it might be easiest for you to empty multiple beds at one time so that you don't have to exit individual clients from those beds. And if you happen to be hearing the noise that's around me, that is coming from construction on the floor beneath us. So I apologize if you're hearing some strange humming noises or drilling. That is just some construction. But emptying multiple beds at one time is actually a two-step process. And I'm going to show you here how that works. And I'll also show you in the training site. But you can get to these two buttons from the bottom of the View All screen or the Unit List screen, but they also have their own buttons on the ShelterPoint dashboard window. And basically, you have to start from updating your confirmation list to unconfirm basically everyone as not going to stay in a bed for that night. And then it will allow them to show up in the Transmit Today's Checkout List window to actually check them out of a bed. So it is a two-step process that you're going to click on Update Confirmation List and then uncheck the boxes that are confirming the clients, and then you'll be able to move forward to pull them out of beds using Transmit Today's Checkout List. But if you don't do the first step, they won't show up in the Transmit Today's Checkout List window, and the first step you take doesn't actually take them out of beds. So you actually do have to go through the two-step process. But keep in mind that if your beds are emptied or if they already represent the clients that you're, some of the clients you're serving, and all you need to do is add the additional clients to beds, then you won't have to go through these steps necessarily. This is not for everyone. This is just those that choose to or need to empty multiple beds at one time before they can put their clients into beds. And we're going to look at that screenshot here. So this is that Update Confirmation List window. Basically, after clicking on Clear and then Confirm, this little confirmation statistics window opens up. That just shows me that none of these clients are confirmed for another night's stay. And then I would move on to Transmit Today's Checkout List. And I'll show you another window here, just another way of looking at these options that you can scroll all the way to the bottom of the unit list view to see these buttons. And these are all those buttons or navigation buttons that you see in that window. And when you do go through Transmit Today's Checkout List, there is one more slide to help break this down for you. This is what you see, and all those red boxes are our help text here. But basically, you would end up checking all of the boxes to say these are all of these clients are coming out of beds. Anyone's box that's not checked off will stay in a bed. And then you would just click Checkout. And at the very top of the screen there, that window that you're seeing, or that date, that's just the date that is going to be assigned to them actually being removed from the bed. So that's really all the slides that I wanted to go through before we went into the live site. And this is just a reminder here that if you do remove clients from beds, you can always go back to the View All window if the system doesn't take you there automatically, just to show you that your work actually, what happened if the system did successfully remove everyone from beds and whatever else you need to see. So that is the conclusion of what I'm going to walk through in the PowerPoint presentation. Just be aware that if you do download the presentation, you'll also see these other slides about generating a list of client ID numbers using either accounts report on your dashboard or report writer. So I'm not going to walk through the rest of these slides, but that is meant to be your detailed sort of steps you can follow if you choose to generate that list. But I am actually going to switch over to the training site, and I'm going to log myself in here. I still am not seeing questions, so if you happen to have questions, do let me know. But I'm going to log in and give you this live demonstration here of how some of this works. And if anyone feels like after this they need a little more help with how to use ShelterPoint, I will be scheduling another in-person session as well in case that would be useful for anyone. So I am going to adjust my settings just a little bit before I start here so that you see the system similarly to how all of you probably currently do. So I'm going to go straight to ShelterPoint. Here's that menu option over on the left side of my screen. And I'll increase the size of my screen a little bit for you. So once I click on ShelterPoint, this is where I'm choosing that provider and that unit list. And I do want to make sure I select the program that actually has the bed. That made my unit list populate. And I'm going to choose this emergency shelter list and then click Submit. That brings up these options for me that show me this client check-in, express check-in. Here's that update confirmation list and transmit checkout list, as well as the View All. So I'm going to go into View All. And I want to show you first what a completely empty bed list looks like, or unit list, because I do consider those to mean the same thing. But as I scroll here, just notice that this is a completely empty list. So if I go into ShelterPoint and I see this, all I have to do is start adding clients to beds. And it's up to me whether I want to put clients into the individual beds that they're actually residing in at night, or if it doesn't matter and I'm just documenting that they're there, and I can put them in a random bed. So this part about whether they're in the specific bed that they actually sleep in at the program, or the unit if you're scattered site, if you have your units named, for us, for the purposes of analyzing this data for the pre-PIT, it will not make a difference whether the clients are in their exact beds or in just a generic bed assignment. That is up to you of what your preference would be, and we can make adjustments to your unit list to make it more helpful for you if you want the unit list to be set up in a customized way so that you see that you have bed number A23, A24, something like that if your numbering system is different than what we've chosen. Again, for the pre-PIT, all we need is clients in beds, and we'll be looking at totals. We won't be looking at the exact beds they sleep in. So as I scroll all the way down, I am also doing this to point out to you that here's my Start Express Check-in button. There's a function here to hold beds, this holding option. These are not being held right now. If they were, it would say the word held. But that's what this button would do. It would be to hold all of these beds so that clients couldn't be put into them. And then you could also release those beds. And that's more for if you're using this in practice for your program. But as I scroll down, you can also see this return to that dashboard option over here, as well as I can print ID cards for my clients, and I can get to that update confirmation list and that transmit checkout list from here as well. So again, this is just to kind of show you all the different, what it looks like when it's totally empty, so you can see more of the options. And now we're going to look at how to put data into these beds. As a note, you can also print this list if that becomes helpful. And there is that overflow bed here as well that I'm noting. So if you just notice that there's always an overflow bed at the bottom of these lists, and that's really so that if you get through every single one of these beds and you find that you have one more person, you can put them into the overflow bed. It still has that function to plug them in here, to check them in, and you can use this empty button as well to put them in from there. And so those are fine to use if you need them. I'm going to scroll back up and start at the top of the list, and pardon me if you're getting busy here. But I'm going to just click on the very first bed here. And again, here I am at a client search window. Perhaps I know the exact client that I'm looking for, but I'm doing this in the training site, so I don't know exactly the clients that are in here. So I'm just going to do a search on the first 2 letters of the name. So we don't have a lot of data in the training site, so you'll see that the numbers are pretty small. But if I find that it's Peter Pickle that I happen to have in my bed, and I know this is my instance of that client because it's the only one, I click on that green plus sign, and it's telling me this is that client's first day, and that's okay. I want to continue and check them into a bed. The system is now letting me say what the date is, and so it doesn't matter to us what date you use to put the client into a bed. It only has to be before September 20 or on September 22nd, 2016. That would be the last date for the purposes of the pre-PIT that you could put the client in a bed. But again, you could start this today. If the clients were put into a bed 2 weeks ago, that's also okay if that's going to be the same clients in beds on the 22nd. But as I scroll down here, I will just go ahead and save and exit. I don't need to change anything. And now that client's in a bed. So it was as simple as that. That client is assigned to a bed. And I'll do that one more time here. So again, I'm going to search by a name. And I just searched on a letter this time. In the live site, you would not want to do that because you would get way too many search results. But in the training site, I don't get very many results. So I'll go ahead and put Daffy Duck into a bed here. That's the right client for this test case. Say yes, it's okay to continue. I would like to put this client into a bed. And here's that window that's showing me the date. As I scroll down, if this client is a single individual, I would just do save and exit. And now that client is also in a bed. So if I want to assign a family to beds, I'll show you this right now as well. So families is similar to that individual check-in. And to do that, I would again start from the green plus sign. This time I would search for the head of the household first. And I'm actually going to use an ID number that I remember has a child attached to it. So if I'm going to check in an individual client by their ID number, because I want to put them into maybe that exact bed, I'll click Submit here. And here's another Donald, another duck, and I'll say Continue. This time, I have the option to change the date if I need to, but I'm not going to worry about anything else here. And what I want to do this time is actually assign Donald Duck's child to a bed from this household members area. So this is how I'm going to avoid putting creating a unaccompanied child bed assignment. So I'm going to check off this box. It's going to tell me again that this is the client's first time staying at my program. And notice that the adult, Donald Duck, he's already been assigned to bed number 3. What I'm doing now by checking off this instance of Daffy Duck is allowing myself to assign him a unit too from this button over on the right side of the screen. So, and I'll zoom in a little bit here. Again, Donald Duck has already been assigned a bed. That's already established up here. But I've checked off the box for the child, and now I have this button here that I can click on to assign a unit to that child. In this case, a unit means a bed. So I click on that, and I can choose the bed that I would like to put this child in. If I would like to put the child next to their parent, I would come up and choose the number of the bed that would be next to the adult. So bed number 4, say select. And now this client is in bed number 4. And again, at the top here, their parent is in bed number 3. Okay? And then if I had more children to put into beds, they would appear here under the household. And I would just continue clicking on this, checking off their boxes, and then clicking on Assign Unit to keep us putting them into beds. And now I'll do Save and Exit. And now I've got 2 clients in beds, 2 more clients here were just assigned to beds. So let me know if anyone has questions at this point. I'm not seeing any questions yet. So I'm going to show you a quick example of Express Check-in as well. But before I do that, and actually, you know what, I will do Express Check-in first, and then we'll look at taking clients out of beds after that. So to get to Express Check-in, I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of my screen. And this would be what I would use to do random bed assignments. The examples I just went through were putting clients into specific beds. Right now I want to start Express Check-in because perhaps I have a list of my clients' ID numbers and I'm ready to just put 10 clients into beds all at one time. So to do that, I will start Express Check-in. At the top of my screen, it's looking very similar to what we just looked at, but it says Express Check-in up here, so I have that indication of where I am. And the date in, I'm going to leave it as it is. This date does not have to match the client's entry into your program. So do keep in mind that the entry date or the enrollment date in your program can be separate from the date that they're assigned to a bed. We are working as a system towards having everyone put clients into beds as soon as they enroll in your program, so we know that they're attached to a bed and the program. But for now, it's enough to just get clients into beds. So this, again, this date does not have to match the exact date that they enroll in your program. So let me know if you have questions about that. So again, I'm doing Express Check-in. So I have this client search screen if I need to search by name. I also have this client ID number field, so I can just populate a list of ID numbers if I have that available. And then here at the bottom is where that client's going to show up once they get put in a bed. It's going to tell me the bed number, and then you'll start to see other options appear down here once I start putting clients into beds. So I'm going to use the client ID field, and I'm not going to search by name. And I'm just going to start looking for clients. And when I say looking for clients, I need to know the client ID numbers if I'm going to go this route, because as soon as I click Submit, watch the bottom of the screen. It's going to first tell me, of course, if there's any alerts, like the client's their first night stay. I can say Continue. But that client has just been assigned a bed. So this is client number 1, his name, and there's the bed assignment. This is your confirmation that that client just got put in that bed. And now I'm going to move on to another client and show you how this works. There's no ID in the system, so I need to come up with a different one. I'm doing random bed assignments here, or random clients, telling me this is the first, their first time staying. Now they're in a bed. They're over here, bed number 6. So the first client just disappeared. They're no longer here, but I know that they got put into a bed because they were in, it told me they were in bed number 5. So now that this client's in bed number 6, I know that they're in a bed, and I can keep looking at other clients. And if it's their first time staying, so I can say Continue. And now that client's in a bed. Search for my next client. Again, their first time staying. Now they're in a bed. And I'm going to show you what it looks like when you try to put the same client in a bed twice, because I already put client 78 in a bed. And it's saying it's their first stay. And then there we go. This client was already checked in. So it wants me to know that I can't put this client into a bed again because they're already in a bed. So clients can't be in 2 beds at one time in the same unit list, just as a note. But I'll look for another one. And actually, we don't have a client of that number yet. Look for a lower one. He's his first time staying. And now this person is also in a bed. So it's doing random bed assignments. It's just grabbing the next available bed. And if I want to do this quickly, I would just keep plugging clients in. And notice that there, we also have just put a couple more clients into beds. So now if I exit from here, it's taking me right back to this unit list window because that's where I started Express Check-in from. And now all of those clients have been attached to beds. So now I've filled up about 11 beds, it looks like, and we're going to look at how to empty beds next. But before I do that, I just want to ask if there's any questions around checking individual clients into beds, checking families into beds, or checking multiple clients into beds at one time using Express Check-in. Any questions? Okay. It does not look like we have any, although maybe there is a question here. There we go. Okay. So, yeah, I can definitely do a family again, Anthony. Let's do that now. So to do a family check-in, I have to start from one of these green plus signs. And there is that option on the ShelterPoint dashboard that says client check-in. And I'm going to show you what that looks like because it's kind of funny to me just to realize what happens if I go back to the ShelterPoint dashboard here. This client check-in or check client in, if I click on this, just notice that it takes me back to the same place where I just was. And this is the view all window as well. So curious as that might be, all I have to do is click on this green plus sign, assuming this is the bed I want to start with. And I would want to start with the head of the household. And I'm struggling a little bit here because I'm trying to think of a household in the system that has a child attached to it that I can use. And I will do that now. So I'm going to go for this one. I might have put this one in a bed already. I did. Let's see. And okay, so I think I put a lot of the clients in the system in beds already, but I am going to look for one more, see if I can get lucky here. And let's see. There we go. And this one is a single person, but I'll show you still how this works. So you do have the date in. As you scroll down, you would have the other household member listed right here. You would check off their box. Once you do that, you would be able to click on this Assign Unit button on the right side of the screen, and you would actually select a unit or a bed. And there's a handout, Anthony, that's on the available from the menu options on the webinar navigation window, and one of them is the check a family into a bed sort of a tutorial, and that's what this document is. This is one that you can download from the webinar navigation option, and this is walking through those steps. You would click on check client in. You would check off the green plus sign or click on the empty button for the bed that you want to start with. And then you would have the search window, and you would either search for the client or use their ID number for the head of the household. Make sure your date in is the date that you want it to be. And then you would see this. You would check off the box for the child, and then you would click on this Assign Unit. And here's what that looks like. You would choose the bed, click on Select, and then you would have not only a bed assignment for the adult. Up there, you have them in bed number 1. You would also have a bed assignment for the child, and click Save and Exit. And then you would see that both of them show up in a bed. So let me know, Anthony, if you have another question about that. But that was the handout that you can pull down from the webinar. And Debbie, I see a question from you as well. So I'll just go back to the screen to show that that client got put in a bed, and you're welcome, Anthony. And I'm just reading your question, Debbie. Yeah, and what you're saying is exactly, I think, correct. So one thing I will mention is it sounds like for Debbie and for a lot of you, what you might see when you go into ShelterPoint is that you have a lot of clients in beds already. And perhaps those clients will be in beds with a date here of 1/26/2016, because that's when we last that's the last time we asked everyone to use ShelterPoint for a PIT count. So if that was the date, you can do one of two things. If the client is still in the program, you can leave them in a bed with that date, and that's okay. If you would prefer, you can empty all of them from beds, and you can start over, and you can use today's date. That would be absolutely fine if they had a 9/1/2016 date of being attached to a bed. And then all you would have to do is make sure that on the night of the 22nd that this list is up to date. And that if anyone has moved out, you would take them out of beds, and if anyone else has moved in, you would put them into beds. This list is going to work the same way if you are scattered site transitional housing. And in that case, you're just going, if they're enrolled in your program and you have a unit dedicated to that household, you would assume that they're going to be in a bed on that night. And then you would think of it, however, basically it applies to your program. If you're a night-by-night shelter, it needs to represent who is actually in the facility on the night of the 22nd. And that's going to be a different way of thinking about it, because you might not be able to populate this list until the night of the 22nd, because you won't know who's coming into your building for that night to sleep in a bed until you start to do your check-in. So we have to think about it differently for different programs. But I also see your question, Anita. And if you have 5 different dorms, then for a custom setup, then we definitely should talk through the help desk about making sure that we get that figured out for your programs. And let me know if you, and again, you can just email us at hmis@allchicago.org, and we'll direct you to a form that we have available on the help desk to actually update your unit list. And you are very welcome, Debbie. So, and you're welcome, Anita. The other thing I wanted to show you was just the removing of clients from beds. So I'm going to show you the individual client, removing them from beds, and then I'll show you the taking all clients out of beds at one time option. So if I want to remove one of these clients, if it's just one person that's left and everyone else is going to stay in their beds, I'm going to focus on Wilma here, and I'm going to say that she's actually left already. So I'm going to check her out. The date's going to populate to be right now, and hopefully she doesn't leave the same day she comes, but in this example I'll say that she did and just do the save and exit. And now Wilma's no longer in a bed, and this bed is now empty. So I could reassign it if I needed to, just that easily. But that's an individual person being removed from a bed. If I happen to remove one of the clients that's connected to a household from a bed, so this is the one where I put the child in the bed with the adult. So if I go from the adult's record to check them out, I would also be able to check out the child from a bed by checking off this box. So I wouldn't have to do the multiple clicks to each of their records. I could take the children out from right here if they're also leaving the program and do a save and exit. And now both of those beds are empty as well. So we want to make sure we utilize those household relationships here. But now let's look at that transmit today's checkout list and the updating confirmation list piece. So I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom. And even with those like 8 or 9 beds or so that are filled right now, if I want to save myself some time but I need to empty all of them, it would be a 2-step process. I would start from update confirmation list. And then when this step is complete, I would do transmit today's checkout list. And to start, I'll click here on update confirmation list. This confirm is what I need to uncheck for everyone, because they are not going to be staying for another night. But that's what this is implying. So if I clear all of these boxes, I can go ahead and click confirm. If I happen to want to say that one person is staying in a bed, I can check off their box, and that one person will not be able to be checked out. But I'm going to assume everyone's leaving, and I'll say confirm. The system is telling me that I have unconfirmed 9 clients, and that's what I wanted to do. So now it's returned me to this window, and I'm just going to scroll up just to show you that the clients are still in bed. So I haven't accomplished checking in anyone out of bed, but I have made sure everyone is listed as not being confirmed. But to actually take them out of bed, now I'm going to click on this transmit today's checkout list. Now everyone appears here, and they're all going to get the same date out, or I can change it for individual clients if I need to. I'm going to check all this time to say all of them are being checked out of bed. And again, if I didn't want to check someone out, I would just not check off their box. And then I would just do checkout. So you probably saw my screen populate a little bit, or process. As I scroll back up now, we are going to find that all of my beds are empty again. So that is the ins and the outs of putting individual clients into beds, putting families into beds, emptying one bed at a time, and then also emptying all of your beds. We also looked at the random bed assignment option if you are just going to use express check-in. You have two handouts that are attached to this webinar. One of them is a full slide deck from the presentation, and then the other one is just the handout on putting families into beds. The other thing that I will do is just pull up this PowerPoint presentation again and show you that there are also slides that you have available that are walking you through adding accounts report to your dashboard. If you would like to set this up to produce this list. So basically, if you get to this step in setting up accounts report, and you might already have accounts report on your dashboard that will show you this, but these would be all the ID numbers that you would use to use Express Check-in if you want to go that route. So just remember that those are there. But as always, and I'll go to our last slide just to show you the contact information for us. You can reach out to me directly if you need to ask me questions, or you can reach out to the help desk by emailing hmis@allchicago.org. You can go directly to the help desk site, and I'll actually post these slides there as well. And we are hopefully available to you when you need us, when you'll find that you get your answers to your questions. But I am also available right now to answer any questions. And we still have some time that we committed to the webinar. So anyone that's gotten what they need already is welcome to leave. But I will stick around for a few minutes and be available if someone has specific questions about the system or generating that list. And I very much appreciate all of you being with me for this last hour and some. I have recorded this webinar, so do let me know or I will send out the link to the recording in case you all would like to watch it again or send it to someone else. And I'm going to start reading some of your questions. So Anthony, I'm going to read your question here. Yeah, so Anthony, it sounds like you ended up with a client being put into an overflow bed. Can you tell me what program you're entering data into the system for? TLP, okay. So it is okay that they went into, and you only have 8 beds. Did it end up that there was, you have an additional child, or was it, is it that you need more beds? And yes, Paula, I will definitely send you a link. I'm assuming you want the link to the recording of the webinar. Okay, if you need more beds, Anthony, we can definitely set those up. And I can also ask Greg, Greg O'Brien, your ATA, sort of how he would like to see it set up too, because he's definitely impacted by some of that when it comes to the data quality assessment. But to answer your original question, it is absolutely okay. If you only have overflow beds available, I'll look at that setup. But overflow beds are okay if it's just for the purposes of documenting that client being in a bed for the pre-pit. Overflow beds will get that job done. It will show us that that person's in a bed. But ideally, we can have it make sense to you so that you see the beds that you actually have available in the program. So I will follow up on that. Thank you for letting me know. Okay. And if the child is not assigned to the same room as their parents, did you still walk through the steps, Anthony, with assigning a unit to that child from at the point where you were putting the adult into a bed and it just showed you overflow is the only option? And I guess that's something we just want to work out. Yeah, that's okay. So thank you for that confirmation. If what you did was walk through the same steps I showed and all it did was allow you to put that, all it gave you as an option was to put that client into an overflow bed for that child, that is okay. I think what we'll do is look at the data. We're going to be pulling it out to just see what this stuff looks like. And if we start to see unaccompanied minors, we'll address that. But I think what you did is still going to work okay to connect those two individuals as being part of the same household. So thank you for that feedback. You will not get dinged, Anthony. No worries. Yeah, you will not get dinged. You'll be okay, but thank you for being so thoughtful. And if anyone else does have questions, do let me know. This is a great time to ask some of those. And you're welcome, Anthony. Okay. I have not seen any more questions come through, so I'll stick around for just 2 more minutes, and then I'll end the webinar if I don't have anyone else have questions.